The year was 1415, and an African empire was about to change the world. Not Europe, not Asia, Africa. You've probably heard countless narratives about African history that center on colonialism, slavery, and conquest. But what if I told you that's only a fraction of the story? What if the real African history test isn't about memorizing dates? It's about understanding the civilizations, innovations, and power structures that shaped our world long before anyone else was ready. Let me take you back, way back. The Kingdom of Kush controlled the Nile Valley from around 2500 BCE, and these weren't just observers of Egyptian civilization. They were creators of it. The Kushites built their own pyramids, minted their own currency, and commanded military forces that rivaled the greatest powers of the ancient world. They weren't secondary players. They were central. Now jump forward with me to medieval times. The Mali Empire, under the leadership of Mansa Musa in the 14th century, held more gold than any nation on earth. When Mansa Musa made his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he traveled with a caravan of 60,000 people and 80 camels carrying 4 tons of gold. The wealth he displayed was so staggering that it destabilized the entire Mediterranean economy for years. Imagine that. One African ruler changed global markets by simply traveling. That's the kind of power we rarely discuss in mainstream history. But here's where it gets more interesting. In 1415, Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal sent expeditions down the African coast. Why? Because the African kingdoms he encountered had already mastered maritime trade, had established trade routes spanning thousands of miles, and possessed goods so valuable that Europeans wanted to bypass the Middle East entirely just to access them directly. The African history test asks this: were Europeans discovering Africa, or were they seeking entry into an already thriving global marketplace that Africans had built? Fast forward to the Great Zimbabwe. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, an architectural marvel rose in southern Africa. The stone structures were so sophisticated, so precisely engineered, that European archaeologists initially refused to believe Africans built them. They created elaborate theories about Arab or European architects instead. It took decades to admit the truth. These were African achievements, constructed by the Shona people with engineering knowledge and architectural vision that rivaled anything built during that same period anywhere else on the planet. Then there's the Songhai Empire. By the 16th century, under Askia Muhammad, Songhai controlled an area larger than Western Europe. Timbuktu, its greatest city, housed universities and libraries that attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. Imagine that. African institutions so respected that international students traveled there to study. The University of Sankore taught mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and Islamic law. This wasn't a backwater region. This was an intellectual center of global significance. Yet somehow these stories vanished from our collective memory. Why? Because the narrative changed. When colonialism arrived in the late 1800s, European powers needed justification for their conquest. They rewrote history. They erased the memories of empires, stripped away the accomplishments, and told the world that Africa was empty, waiting to be civilized. That lie became the dominant narrative for generations. The African history test, then, isn't about dates or names alone. It's about asking yourself, how many stories have I missed? How much of Africa's true history never reached my classroom? What else have I been taught to forget? These civilizations, Kush, Mali, Great Zimbabwe, Songhai, they weren't anomalies. They were part of a continuous pattern of African advancement, innovation, trade, and power that extends back millennia. From the pyramids to the universities, from maritime empires to architectural wonders, Africa shaped human civilization in ways that most people never la.